This story seems honestly totally made up, except that it really happened. It is one of the most fascinating historical mysteries that will probably never be solved, and it's one of the most terrifying ones. This is the story of Mary Celeste. On a crisp November day in 1872, Captain Benjamin Briggs, an experienced and well-respected seafarer, set sail from New York Harbor aboard the Mary Celeste. The ship was headed for Genoa, carrying a cargo of industrial alcohol. But what was supposed to be a routine voyage quickly turned into one of the most perplexing maritime mysteries of all time. Captain Briggs, his wife, their 2-year-old daughter, and a crew of 7 set sail on what seemed to be a routine voyage. But weeks later, Mary Celeste was found adrift in the Atlantic, eerily abandoned. Meals were left untouched, belongings undisturbed, and the ship itself was in perfect condition. What could have driven the captain and his crew to vanish without a trace? This is the bone-chilling story of the ghost ship Mary Celeste and the mysterious fate of its crew. Mary Celeste, previously named Amazon, was a brigantine-rigged merchant ship built on Spencer's Island, Nova Scotia in 1861. Despite seeming like a decent ship, it appeared cursed from day one. The first captain died of pneumonia on board. The next one collided with a fishing boat, and while the Amazon was under repair, it caught fire. In 1876, a storm drove the ship onto the coast of one of the Canadian islands, leaving her a wreck. Sold to an American businessman, she was refitted to transport industrial alcohol from the east coast of America to Genoa, Italy, and reborn as Mary Celeste. Yet, strange occurrences continued. Command of Mary Celeste was given to an experienced captain named Benjamin Briggs, a native of Nantucket, Massachusetts, who had been a sea captain for over 20 years. Briggs was a reputable, competent, and seasoned sailor who owned a 1/16th share in the ship himself and regularly acted as its skipper for cargo voyages across the Atlantic. For the ill-fated final voyage, Briggs brought along his wife Sarah and their adorable 2-year-old daughter Sophia Matilda. Rounding out the crew were First Mate Richard William Tobias, able seaman Edward William Head, and a Norwegian cook named Boyd. By all accounts, this seemed to be yet another routine transatlantic cargo journey, and no one could have expected the tragedy that awaited them. On November 7, 1872, Mary Celeste set sail from the port of New York bound for Genoa, Italy. Her cargo manifest listed 1,701 barrels of raw American denatured alcohol, which was a lucrative trading commodity at the time being imported into Europe. Weather conditions for the transatlantic crossings were reportedly favorable, as the vessel cleared the harbor and set course for the Strait of Gibraltar and the Mediterranean. All seemed well as Mary Celeste began her westward voyage across the Atlantic. In the following weeks, no communication was received by the vessel's owners or families of the crew aside from the fact that it departed from the New York harbor as planned. Not uncommon given the communications technology of the late 1800s, sailing vessels often went weeks or even months in transit without contact during passages. So as November rolled into December 1872, with no word, nothing appeared amiss. It wasn't until December 5th that the first suspicions would arise after Mary Celeste failed to arrive at her scheduled destination of Genoa Harbor, as expected after the typical 2 to 3 week crossing. With no explanation for her delay, the ship was officially reported overdue. So you see, the stage was now set for one of history's most perplexing maritime mysteries to unfold, as suspicious parties began to realize something was very wrong. But no one yet could imagine the strangeness that was about to be discovered in the open Atlantic some 400 miles off of the coast of Portugal. On December 4th, 1872, the 𝐷 a British brigantine sailing from London to Genoa with a cargo of crude coal tar, was traveling through the same Atlantic waters between the Azores and Portugal. Its captain, David Morehouse, and his crew spotted a mysterious ghostly brigantine drifting about 400 miles west of Portugal. The Mary Celeste was swaying lifelessly atop calm seas with her crew nowhere in sight. More curiously still, the crew's sea boots and jackets were neatly stowed on the poop deck, while the lifeboat was missing from its davits. But she appeared otherwise seaworthy and in sound condition. The galley stove still contained hot coffee and an unfinished meal of beefsteak. Personal belongings and valuables like the ship's papers, nautical instruments, chronometer, and the crew's sea chests were all left on board untouched. The boat had not even been touched. But despite all this, there was no trace of the people who had been on board just over a month prior. It was as if Captain Briggs, his wife, young daughter, and the entire crew had been instantly beamed off of the decks without explanation. Captain Morehouse pondered endlessly about what could have possibly caused an experienced captain like Briggs to suddenly desert his command. The man seemed so reputable from all accounts, and there were no signs of bad weather on the sea. What could have compelled such an evacuation in apparent haste, leaving possessions and provisions behind? He tried to put himself in Briggs' shoes, trying to understand what he might have witnessed to prompt such an action. Could they have seen signs of an impending storm, felt tremors of an approaching earthquake at sea, spotted something strange in the distance that caused panic? So many possibilities, yet no evidence to support any theory. Morehouse and his crew took the uncanny vessel under tow and discovered something strange upon boarding. Mary Celeste's cargo of ethanol barrels was found intact and undisturbed below decks, but her bark was deserted with not a single soul left to be seen. Even stranger, a luncheon of untouched food still sat at the cabin table, as if the occupants fled in haste. An inspection of the logbook and ship's records by Captain Morehouse further added to the strangeness. The last entry was dated 10 days prior on November 25th and indicated fair weather conditions with the vessel on course. No signs of foul play, accident, storm damage, or piracy could explain the crew's unknown fate. They found personal items scattered about Briggs' cabin, including a sheathed sword under the bed, but most of the ship's papers were missing, along with the captain's navigational instruments. Galley equipment was neatly stowed away, but there were ample provisions in the stores. It was as if the Mary Celeste had been evacuated under controlled circumstances by those aboard. But if so, where did they go, and what possibly could have caused them to abandon their still seaworthy vessel with no supplies? An international mystery had now been uncovered, and search efforts were soon organized. This shocking discovery of a ghost ship drifting alone at sea with no trace of the crew would spark global intrigue and speculation. The mystery was only deepening as investigations soon got underway. Word of Mary Celeste's astonishing discovery quickly spread, and an official investigation was launched to try and solve the puzzling disappearance of its crew. On January 4th, 1873, the brigantines arrived at the port of Gibraltar, where a British Board of Trade inquiry was promptly commissioned. Mary Celeste arrived a day later to be met by further curiosity from local authorities. A formal Board of Trade investigation and hearing was subsequently launched in February to determine the true cause of the crew's disappearance. The U.S. consul in Gibraltar, Edmund Loving, was put in charge of gathering testimonies and evidence. He conducted interviews with Captain David Morehouse and his crew about the condition they found with the Mary Celeste. They presented their findings, which added further mysteries, like water casks being only partially filled and the forward pump disconnected. Inspections found Mary Celeste in a seaworthy state, contradicting theories of accident or piracy. The logbook was taken into evidence and examined closely for clues. Notably, the last entry on November 25th reported York Gibraltar scrawled in Celeste's Captain Briggs' hand alongside a measurement of dolls and glasses. While it looked harmless, it fueled speculation that the captain was temporarily distracted or incapacitated when the evacuation occurred days later. Mary Celeste was then towed to Genoa, Italy, where its final destination port authorities launched their investigation. Theories about what happened ranged from plausible to downright bizarre. Some suggested a sudden mutiny, though there was no evidence to support this. Others think they abandoned the ship in a panic, perhaps fearing an explosion from the alcohol fumes. There are even more far-fetched ideas involving sea monsters, alien abductions, or supernatural forces. In the real-world case, however, questions continued to vastly outnumber answers. Official insurer Lloyd's of London ruled there was no case for insurance fraud and paid out the full claim, since no hint of criminal wrongdoing could be substantiated. The ship's ownership was transferred in the aftermath. She resumed further trading voyages in 1879 to 1884 under various names, such as Mary Celeste, Amazon, and Jenny, before finally meeting her demise after being shipwrecked off of Haiti's coast in 1885. But still, despite numerous investigations and endless speculation, the fate of the Mary Celeste's crew remains one of the sea's greatest unsolved mysteries. What could have caused 10 experienced sailors to disappear without a trace? We may never know, but one thing is certain: the Mary Celeste's ghostly tale continues to haunt the annals of maritime history.